Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Kenworth Northeast Training Academy. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into clutch installation and performance essentials. My name is Melinda. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Kenworth Northeast. And more importantly, we are joined by Jerry Cohn from Lipe Clutch. Cameras and audio are defaulted to off to reduce background noise during our session today. When you do have a question, feel free to pop it in the Q&A at any point in time, and we will address them throughout the call. In addition to today's training, we've also got a lineup of other events this year going through October. And then once we hit the end of the year, we'll take a small break over the holidays and get back to it in 2026. So keep an eye out for our 2026 calendar of events that will start to pop up in the coming months too. You'll find all of that information at www.kenworthne.com/events. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and get things started.
All right, guys, my name is Jerry Cohn. I'm Director of Sales and Marketing for Lipe Clutch. Looking forward to the next 30 minutes. Wanting to really just get in and deep dive about clutches a little bit and talk about a bunch of different things. So we're just going to spend a couple minutes, kind of give you a brief introduction of Lipe Clutch. We've been around since the early started in 1890 when Charles Lipe owned the company, and then it went all the way up to 1982 is when Lipe was purchased their name from Halodex. And from then on, we have grown into the world's number 3 leading clutch manufacturer, and that's for the world. So we continue to grow every day, and we look forward to our continued partnership with Kenworth Northeast. So really, that's kind of a little history of us. I'll show you a couple slides of some of the facilities. One big thing to keep in mind is when you look at any of your industry clutch people that you buy from, everybody has to be IATF 16949 or ISO 14001 or ISO 45001 or ISO 9001. And these come from the industry. If you do not pass these industry tests, you cannot be a clutch manufacturer. So we get tested every year where we have people walk around our facility, check our machinery, making sure that we dyno test every clutch. So it's a big process to get your certification, but every year it's good to know that our industry are watching the clutches, because we're selling something that is a job that is needs to make these trucks run down the road. So we feel proud to know that we can compete with any of you manufacturers, whether it's OEM Eaton or any of the other manufacturers in the field. So what does the clutch really do? I mean, honestly, the clutch is like a big old clamp, and most people doesn't realize what I mean by that. But really, a clamp, it clamps on, it clamps off, and that's basically all a clutch does. So if you think about when a clutch is engaged and going down the road, it's clamped on. And when that's happening, that's carrying the truck from one end to the other. When the truck is disengaged, of course, that would put it in a neutral facility of some type. And this allows it to be disengaged, which can create problems if a driver doesn't know exactly how to drive a truck. And we'll go into that a little bit here as we go. One of the biggest things I like to talk about in these videos is how to make sure we have the right clutch. And that's critical, because if we're not looking at our clutch and we're just going by when the clutch shows up at the store, sometimes we get in a hurry, we grab the clutch, we just stick it into the truck, we're not looking at it, we'll assume that we either took the VIN number or the right manufacturer number of a 208925, and we just put it up in the truck and install it. Not saying every mechanic does that, but we have had certain warranties that create that. So we kind of like everybody to take a second and look and make sure that they have a 2-inch input shaft. So they take a second and be able to make sure that they measure across the clutch and that it's a 15.5-inch clutch. We also like you to count the springs on a clutch, because that is critical. in measuring a clutch. You know, a 7-spring clutch is always going to be in a Kenworth or any of the other manufacturers. But if you're a 9-spring clutch, those are for Mac applications only. So if you see the extra 2 springs in a clutch, we know automatically that you're using a Mac clutch, and we do not ever want to put a Mac clutch in a 7-spring. It will fit. It just will go into the engaged category from the beginning. So another step that we like to look at is the flywheel bore. So as we take the flywheel off to have that flywheel resurfaced, which plays a critical role in the clutch working correctly, is in making sure that we turn every flywheel, we would like to measure across the flywheel bore. And what you're going to come up with is quite a few different measurements. If you're looking at a 7-inch spread between those 2 arrows you see on the screen, you're looking at an 8-spring disc clutch. If the flywheel is 8.5 inch, that's a 10-spring. So you're probably looking at anywhere from 2012 and back. If it's a 10-inch flywheel bore, you're probably 2012 and up. And that is pretty much telling you it would be a 7 or a 9-spring. So you just want to make sure that we're looking at that really close. And those are critical measurements. Also remember, if a flywheel is not turned and we're not keeping track of that, that could void your warranty at clutch installation time. The chart over to the left is just a reference chart, so don't go by the RPMs or the torque. I'm just using it as a reference. Because today's vehicles, you're looking at, most clutches have a 1800 to 2050 torque. And those are your most standard industries. But you can go up to a 2400 clutch that we offer, which is a Lipe 1A. And that's more for your heavy haul, like logging trucks, hard haul rock trucks and stuff like that. But for the most industry, you're looking at a 2050 is the type of truck that you will see mostly on today's road. Because most RPMs today are running up to 600, 650 horsepower, we definitely want to at least see an 1850 to 2050, and those are your 6-paddle discs. And when I say 6-paddle, if you took the disc that we measured across, you would actually have 6 discs on it. If it was something like a 1700 torque, you would have 4 paddles on it. So kind of a little recap of what we talked about. So when we transmit and torque, the clutch is pressed up against the flywheel and it's going down the road. We kind of like to show a picture just so people can actually see how everything's put together from the input shaft to how everything compresses together. And that's why we call it a big old clamp, because it just all clamps together. When it's discontinued, you can actually see the gap from when the clutch is not engaged. So critical, when we're looking at clutch, when you take it off, it was kind of like the other picture, but this is a live picture that I like to be able to use and show people. So when you're actually pulling it off, you're actually taking that flywheel and you're taking that measurement, and this one is showing a 10-inch. So we would know that if it's a 10-inch flywheel and has 7 springs, it would probably go into a Kenworth truck just because of the measurements. So how do I know if my flywheel can be resurfaced? The person resurfacing it would know, right? No, you have to be able to micrometer those flywheels and make sure that we're looking for the right thickness. And is it true that flywheels have a minimum thickness? Unfortunately, this measurement is all but impossible to check. This is a responsibility of the mechanic. So there is no minimum thickness. We have to micrometer every flywheel at installation, because if we don't, what ends up happening is when you knock the blocks out of the clutch and put everything together, most people say they check for their 1/2-inch gap to make sure that that gap's there, but that doesn't always happen. So if you're at a 5/8 or the gap is too big, first thing people think they need to do is grab their adjustment wrench and adjust the clutch to get you to a 1/2 inch. And that's the first mistake of a warranty, is if you're adjusting the clutch at installation, you just created your first defect. There should be no adjustment of that clutch at installation. Everything should fit properly. If you turn the flywheel, bought a flywheel, put in, a new clutch, and all the components, especially in the install kit, which is a critical piece, you shouldn't have any problem at all with that clutch going in and having your half-inch set up. So we kind of covered that. So go checking the flywheel for resurfacing. So people have different ways of doing that, but there are tools out there, and we do have a few of them that are available. But when you take that tool and you lay it across the bolts of the flywheel, you're going to have a 5/16. If that tool, and this is just a reference, I still believe in the micrometer, still should check it for your thickness. But to get you a good rule of thumb, you can lay this tool across it. And if you have a 5/16 gap, then that flywheel can be reused, but still has to be turned. If it's flat onto the bolts, then that flywheel is no good, and you need to go buy a flywheel at Kenworth Northeast. So another way to check your flywheel too, and it's another measurement, is around the edge of the flywheel. You want to make sure you have that gap by the picture on the bottom. If you see that you have a gap in between the ring of the ends of the flywheel, then that flywheel also can be turned. But if that gap's not there, then there's another flywheel that needs to be purchased, and not turn it thinking that it'll be okay, because what'll happen is it's going to shorten the life of your clutch, or it's going to create some problems that you will see as we go down the road. It could be multi variations of problems, but we'll go into a lot of them here in a few minutes of showing you what happens when things are not installed correctly. But an unacceptable measurement is just like the first picture. It will be flat onto the edge of the flywheel, and that's telling you that you need to purchase a flywheel. 5/16 clearance ensures the flywheel will outlive the clutch, and that's your key component. If you've got your 5/16 inch, which is a very minimum amount of space in there where that clutch works at, but if you have that clearance, you're going to get the most life out of the clutch. A Caterpillar is the only engine manufacturer that offers a thinner flywheel mounting bolt washer. And what that means is that it's a little bit different, and there's a little bit different measurements on the Caterpillar flywheel. There are two reasons for resurfacing. Flat surface offers best service for friction material, and failure to resurface your flywheel will void your warranty. So just quickly on the warranty, most warranties are a 24-month warranty, and that's if you put a brand new clutch in it. You also turn the flywheel, and you install kit. If we're not looking at all the components of that clutch, and that goes from the input shaft, is critical, because an input shaft comes into an install kit. What we have to remember today is that these clutches are toting 600, 650 horsepower, and you're taking a 170-pound clutch and you're slinging it around at 2,000 RPMs. Most people are looking at that input shaft and go, oh, there's no markings on it. There's no problem with it. But you got to think about that weight slinging around on that clutch for all that time. It's going to create some kind of wear. And if you use the old input shaft, especially running that high RPMs, you're going to have some type of wear, which can create clutch failure. Not saying it will always, but it's worth to go ahead and spend that money, whatever it is, to buy an install kit, so you don't void your warranty. And you also know that you've put all the components in the clutch, because who wants to lay underneath the truck for another 8 hours and do this job all over again? So a quick summary: customers can specify Lipe Clutch as a product of choice, a well-recognized, respected brand. And we, like we said at the beginning of the slide, we're the #3 clutch company of the world. So love for you to try one of our clutches. So when we look at the components of the clutch, all of this is critical. When we talk about the input shaft and all your bushings and all, this is kind of a setup. And it really kind of helps us out a little bit, because when you see what you're getting in the kit, I mean, you're getting your cross shaft bushings, you're getting your retainer, you're getting your fork yoke, your input shaft, your bearing, clutch brake, fiber space. So all these components are in the box. What does not come in the box are your cross shafts. Cross shafts would either be reusable or would be bought at a dealership if they are wore or tore up. You will see in some of the pictures that we show here in a little bit that somebody can bend cross shaft. So they are available, but not through clutch companies. You have to buy them at the OEM. Sometimes you can get them other places, but prefer shop would be go to an OEM and get one if you happen to bend one. So when we start looking at components, well, we just talked about the cross shaft. That's a prime example of what can happen to it. These parts should be replaced every time. And these are live pictures that I have taken at some point in time of my career from someone saying, hey, I've got a bad clutch. You sold me a bad clutch. So I would go into shops or have the components shipped back so that we can determine what created the failure. And then these are some of the parts that come off of the truck after you just put a brand new clutch in it. So it's just making sure that we do the job right the first time, and you're not going to have pretty much no problems putting the clutch in as long as we put the correct parts in and making sure they're all brand new. So when you look at these kind of different things, you notice here on the left is the difference of the one on the right is if you see the crack up top. The other side, you do not. That crack up top will create heat, stress, create problems for you on the long haul. We also want to check when we're putting all our cross shaft bushings in, we want to make sure we don't have any wear on those little fingers, because wear on those fingers is going to create extra gap or on the 1/2 inch, and it can create the clutch nut to set up right, and it can also create a problem in installation. And that's just a picture of what we were looking at, but it's just showing you the fingers of the clutch, and where we want to check for the area also sees contact from slides, the release bearing cover, and the more wear, the more noise. So we definitely buy the install kit, you get one of those to put in it, and then you don't have to worry about any noise. And believe me, the driver will hear these noises and tell you his clutch is coming apart. So if we just make sure we put a new install kit in at the beginning, you will eliminate all these problems. So we talked a minute ago about the input shaft. That input shaft is so critical, and that actual input shaft was in a clutch that a guy sent back to me for a warranty. Look how shiny and wore it is, but nobody recognized that in installation. So that there created warranty by itself because of the wear of the shaft. So that's so critical, making sure we just take these parts down, look at them, and you can't look at them really from underneath the truck. You really need to get them out, clean them up, and making sure they don't have any grit or grime on them, and just taking a good overall look to making sure that we have put this input shaft in there that has brand new and have not have any wear at all. Because when you take the time to not do it right, then again, like we said, we're going to spend 6 or 8 hours on the truck doing this all over again, just because we tried to make it happen quicker than we should have. So during the clutch installation, these gaps are critical, and you heard me say 1/2 inch quite a bit. But during the clutch installation, the initial setup there should be between 1/2 and 5/8 distance between the clutch cover and the back side of the release bearing. This measurement lets the installer verify the clutch has been installed correctly. The clutch is in the proper adjustment. If this measurement is not correct, it will affect plate load, release, torque capabilities of the clutch, and diminishing clutch life. So after we have set the clutch up and knocked the blocks out of the clutch, if you're not sitting at that 5/8 or that 1/2 inch gap that we've been talking about, then there's a problem. Somewhere in installation, something wasn't done correctly. And if we adjust the clutch to fix that, then all we're doing is creating warranty. So it's definitely something we want to look at and make sure that we don't have any issues at all. So some of these pictures you'll see now is most of it is driver error because we've already have identified we put the clutch in correctly. But it shows you what can happen out there. And drivers can create clutch problems. Most people probably wouldn't believe that on this phone, but they definitely can create problems that when you put in a clutch correctly from the beginning, it still can be tore up just by abuse. So we actually had this clutch get sent back to us saying that we sold them a bad clutch. And what happened was the clutch exploded. And that was because the driver kept his foot rested on the clutch pedal while in low gear, driving down an incline. And the whole clutch just exploded. And then it's not just going to tear the clutch up, but it's also going to tear all the components up in the transmission. So a $2,000 clutch job can end up becoming a $10,000 job if you have to start replacing transmission parts. So it's best to, I know it's hard to get a good driver to understand, but it's critical if they're using that clutch pedal as a rest foot for their foot as they're going down the road. So this clutch came back. If you notice the blue on the clutch, that tells you that a lot of things happened there. A complaint was slipping, but the problem installed was a 1700 torque clutch and a 600 horsepower 2050 torque ISX engine. Here's one of the biggest problems that we see happen mostly. So if you think of a truck coming in brand new, OEM from the dealership, it's been spec'd by the manufacturers for a certain load. Maybe that driver has been hauling grain his whole life, and he bought that truck and he had it built for grain. But then he sold it 5 years later, and that driver decided he was going to haul rock. Well, originally it was spec'd at 1700 torque. Well, when you start hauling rock, you need more torque. So a 1700 is only going to carry four paddles, which is probably going to burn that clutch up pretty quick. So when we're putting it back in, always remember when you walk into the parts counter, people can ask you for the 6 digit of the VIN, which is a critical piece of the component. But if that truck was sold used at any point in time and you change the load specification, that truck might need a 6 paddle. And if you tell them to give you the clutch for the VIN number, if we haven't took the time to do those measurements that I talked about earlier in this presentation, then you could have the same problem. You could be setting yourself up for failure. It could be Eaton's clutch, it could be our clutch, it could be anybody's clutch. But if we're putting the wrong clutch in for the application, everybody's clutch is going to burn up, and you're going to keep coming back going, I'm not going to buy another Lipe clutch or a Eaton clutch because they're bad clutches. Well, it's not necessarily a bad clutch. It's just making sure we do the correct measurements from the beginning and making sure we put the right clutch in there for that application. So the complaint is no release. The problem was a severe shock load. These clutches can only take so much of a shock load. And at some point in time, remember we said that you're only looking at 3/16 gap in most cases when you start talking about the flywheel, you've got your center plate, you've got your 2 discs, and you got your cover assembly. When all those put together, you probably only got a 5/16 clearance in most cases when all that's put together. So it doesn't take but the simplest problem to create a shock load. And then next thing you know, you're breaking the cover off the retainer, finding a spring in the inspection housing. And the first thing you're saying is that was a bad disc. Well, not necessarily a bad disc, but most of the time, a clutch is like DNA. It tells you everything just by looking at it. So when that clutch comes out, I can almost look at it, whether it's blue, whether the retainer was broke off of it, what the teeth looks like on the 10 count. I mean, we can tell so much by looking at that clutch that it has its own DNA power just by looking at it at the end when we know what created the problem. So a complaint slipping, problem failure to keep the unit adjusted, retainer made contact from the disc. Well, the biggest problem we see happen mostly is when your truck comes in for PM, we always adjust the clutch, right? No, we don't. There's so many people will, maybe to stick a bolt up in it, put their finger up in there, check for a measurement with a tool that's not a 1/2 inch, and they're adjusting clutches based off of line. Or they might just say, hey, you know what, it's been on the road for 50,000 miles. I just think it needs 2 turns, and that'll be enough for an adjustment. While we have that clutch in for the PM, why not, check for the 1/2 inch and make sure we got the right adjustment? Because if we do that, we're just going to get more wear out the clutch. It's going to last longer, and we're not going to have to do a clutch job as quickly. So here's another issue that we see is complaint broken cover, problem failed to roll fork over the bearing. You wouldn't believe how many times we're told that when we ship them a clutch that it was broke from the factory. That crack does not come broke from the factory. I mean, it's obviously what happened was we didn't roll the fork over, but that crack will also tell us that just by looking at it, because we know where the crack is and we know where the fork is on the bearing. So it's obvious what created the crack. So when we start talking about the automatic clutches, if you did have a Volvo and on some of the Kenworths, it's very key that we look at the VIN number, because there's an extra dash or F or number behind there that can tell you which type of I-shift clutch you would need. Another thing to keep in mind too is if you are working on Kenworth trucks, but you also work on internationals and Volvos and Macs, remember most of the clutches, if you know how to look up that clutch like I told you at the beginning, then you could go in a Kenworth dealer and you could buy a clutch for a Volvo. And as long as you're taking those measurements, it's the same 208 925 82H clutch that you would put in an International or a Mac or a Volvo Freightliner. All of them are the same. So instead of you having to leave your preferred dealer to go somewhere else to get a clutch, if you took those measurements, you could buy both of the clutches you need from Kenworth Northeast and not have to go somewhere else to get another clutch. And then you can buy all your parts from where you want to purchase your parts from. So we're back to the service warranty, and I put this back up for a reason, is because we've talked about this quite a bit. Is the warranty again was 24 months, and that's if you turn the flywheel, put an install kit in, and a brand new clutch. If we're not doing that stuff, then your warranty is voided from day one. And part of the warranty process is furnishing the receipts to Kenworth Northeast so they can follow warranty with us. And we just want to make sure you guys are not putting in a clutch that creates a problem. But if you ever have a technical issue that you cannot answer, you can always reach our tech support line at 877-642-2419. And we don't matter if it's an Eaton clutch or any other brand. If you are having an issue installing it, we would love to be able to help you figure out what may be the problem, because that could just save you going forward and creating a problem. Most of the time, if you call us when you're having an engagement problem or some type of problem, we've done this so long that we can give you things to check to see if we can help you fix the problem without just yanking the clutch out and saying it's defect. So we never have a problem helping you, and we're never going to ask you what clutch is went in there, because all the clutches are working the same way as we just discussed today. So whether it's an Eaton or another aftermarket clutch or a Lipe clutch, they all get installed the same correct way, and they all bolt the same way, and they're all looking for the half-inch gap, and all of them are brand new in the box. So we pretty much can figure out any manufacturer's clutch just by you giving us some information. So at that point, Melinda, I'm just open it for questions. If there's something I could try to answer, if I can't get you an answer, I'll get Melinda to get your telephone number, and we'll get you an answer and get back to you.
All right, thank you, Jerry.